Greetings, Mile High Champions. You are listening to the sultry voice of your commissioner. Welcome. And if you hear my voice, you're also going to hear very shortly somebody else's voice that should be very familiar to you by now. How you doing, Noel?
Oh my gosh! Sorry, I didn't realize we were recording. I'm doing just dandy. How are you, Mike?
Oh, I'm good. You know what? When you get lost in Elton John, boys, sometimes it's just hard to come back to Earth when you're just blasting off in a rocket. Anyways, let's get right into our fantasy football review here for the Mile High Champions League. First off, MVT, the most valuable team. Dun da da da. This one goes to Nick, who was his first MVT of the week, who beat very tough Ben, 164 to 152. Boy, he had a great week. So congratulations, Nick, on your first MVT ever, possibly first of the season. There might be more.
Game of the week,
congratulations on that. What's that?
Game of the week, too.
Game of the week. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, good job, Nick. And then we also, part of that was because of the MVP, which is actually shared this week by two players. One Nick has, CJ Anderson, 45 points. One Kenfield has, Tom Brady, 45 points. I don't think I need to go into Tom Brady, his tremendous game, because he's Tom Brady. He's first ballot Hall of Famer type. But CJ Anderson, who I've railed on before and kind of is making me eat crow right now, rushed 25 yards for 25 times, 118 yards, one touchdown, 3 reception, 36 yards, and another aerial touchdown, giving him 45 points. That's up with Tom Brady, who had a really good game, came back in strong form of week 2, 30 completions, 447 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then, because he's such a scrambler, he rushed twice for 9 yards, and also got him 45 points. So congratulations there, Nick, and congratulations, Kenfield. You guys share the MVP. Let's go on to news. Noel, you want to do news first?
Sure.
Share your tight end bonanza.
Yes, this was the week to not be a tight end. Well, in one case, one of the most reliable, but unheralded tight ends in Greg Olsen, who is now on the IR, underwent surgery and is out probably about 8 weeks of that. And then the other one is not so unexpected in Jordan Reed, who I've never actually had him in fantasy, but I know a few of you had, and he'll have a few great weeks. And then since he's kind of unfortunately partially made of glass, he'll crack and he has to put back together. And also, I think Larson might start having a bit of a problem here with his stashing Andrew Luck in his IR spot, because they're not really saying when he's going to be back, but all of a sudden, he was going to be back for week 1. Now he's not. Back for week 2. No, he wasn't. And he's already ruled out for week 3. So, yes, have fun with that, Larson. But yes, this was a bad week to be a standout fantasy tight end.
Do you think his beard has something to do with it?
Maybe it might have more to do with the fact that their old GM just decided that he just should draft weird random players in the first round, sign old free agents, and not actually protect his once in a generation talent quarterback. And it's good when your quarterback gets injuries that would be sustained if you got hit by a car. So I'm putting this more on Grigson, who's
Stupid
now with the
Grigson.
Browns.
Oh, well, that's punishment enough. You don't nobody want to go to the Browns. All right. Very good. Thank you, Noel. My fantasy news of the week is actually much more of an opinion piece than a stated observation by others. My news is that Russell Wilson is struggling, and my question, I guess I would pose to you and to others, Noel, is he still a fantasy relevant quarterback? I bring this up because my own Cam Newton is in the exact same boat. They're just tooling along in the ocean, kind of sucking together. Don't look too far into that comment. And they're just not playing well. And so I was just curious, let's do this. Just answer yes or no, Noel, just off the top of your head. Is Russell Wilson still a relevant fantasy quarterback?
Yes. It's hard to just do one word, though, because I think in both these cases, it's an issue not only with their offensive lines, but they're very similar because both have bad offensive lines. And while I think Mike Shula of the Panthers is a worse play caller than Darrell Bevell, who is the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. I think both have also been shitty as far as actually making their offensive work. But I think I have more faith in Wilson because I think he's got more tools and more, not more tools, more weapons on the outside to actually help him out, as where the Panthers just have no one. And they have Cam Newton. They blame him for everything. So I go with yes, but it may take a little while, I think.
Yes, with some exposition. Let's just say that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Let's move on to, now that we've done the news, let's go on to the shithead of the week. And after that, we're introducing a new segment because I don't want as much fun as it is to be competitive and rail on each other. I also want there to be some uplifting news in our weekly podcast. So we're going to do Noel's shithead of the week. And then I'm going to introduce a new segment called the champion of the week. So Noel, who's the shithead of the week?
So he's pretty much been a shithead for a while now. It is Bengals owner and de facto general manager, Mike Brown. Because if any of you haven't heard so far this week, the Bengals up and shit can their offensive coordinator after 2 weeks of not scoring a touchdown, and the first week where they didn't score a single goddamn point. And the reason I put this mostly on Mike Brown and not on, say, the Red Rocket or fired offensive coordinator, I guess the last name was like Zampese or something, is because Mike Brown is a cheap-ass douchebag. It took him Marvin Lewis begging him early in the 2000s to actually get him a scouting department, something that most professional football teams have had at least since the mid-'80s. So there's that. Also, Mike Brown apparently, or I guess reportedly, voted against allowing the Chargers and Raiders and Rams to relocate, mostly because he thought it would end up raising the salary cap and he'd have to spend more money. And the reason I put the early season struggles on him more so than those other people is the Bengals' two best offensive linemen from last year were due to get paid, so he decided, let's move on and get cheaper players. So Mike Brown is the shithead of the week, even though it's kind of a vanilla shithead of the week. It's ow, sorry, my dog's attacking me. It's well deserved because anyone who makes decisions based on the fact that you just want to pay a few more $1 million to players, even while you're raking in millions of dollars from television and other things, is a shithead.
You shithead, Mike Brown. I agree with you, Noel, 100%. My champion of the week is actually for weeks 1 and 2, considering this is the second week, and we're starting the segment now. But it's relevant because it was a persistent event. But my champion of the week is J.J. Watt, who started out with a humble request to help him match a couple donations here and there, and he started out, I think, with a $5 million target.
I think it was actually $1 million. It was very humble.
It was pretty low, well, at least relative to what they ultimately ended up raising, which was $37,132,057 from 431 different donors. So
it just keeps going up.
It's with all the tragedy that's been hitting the southeast part of our country, it's good to see that there's a lot of good people out there, especially led by somebody like J.J. Watt, who could be a prima donna NFL superstar, and he took a different tack and is being as gracious and as humble as your everyday round the corner pastor, priest, just teacher, good person type of person. So I admire J.J. Watt. I respect the hell out of him, and I would make him my champion for weeks 1 and 2 for a hell of an effort to help everyone in Houston that's been affected by Harvey. So congratulations, JJ. If you are listening, you maybe, who knows. Kudos to you, good sir. You definitely deserve all the credit and admiration you've been getting. So
here. I would imagine it'll keep going up because last I saw was 20 million. So when you said 37 million just now, I'm like, wow, it's not stopping.
It's one of those things I think that snowballs, because once you see that, he's like, we want to raise 1 million, like you're saying, and then it gets to 1, and then it's like, wow, we hit our target, and we're actually at 2 million. That's double what we wanted. It just builds on itself. So the more press it gets, the more they raise, and it just snowballs. And now we're up to 37 million. So who knows? They said it. They're kind of calling it at that point, quote unquote. But he'll probably still. It's through his foundation, so he'll probably still continue to raise money for relief for Harvey. So that's awesome. Way to go, JJ. Let's go to the reviews for week 1, and we start off with your game, Noel. You versus the Buffaloes, and it wasn't. You had a good week. 120 is certainly a respectable score, but you're gonna have a hard time when you go up against teams that put up north of 135. That's typically the bogey for teams that make the winner's circle, which is to say, to make the winner's circle, you should have about an 8-4 record, maybe 7-5. You should be winning about twice as many games as you're losing. So Vanessa hitting at about 160 this week clearly cleared that hurdle quite easily. And if you look at the scores here, it's fairly obvious who the winners on her team are. Second week in a row, Kareem Hunt had a tremendous week. His 66-point debut was phenomenal nonetheless, but then he followed it up with a 39-point performance, 13 rushes, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 3 receptions for 28 yards. So within the span of 2 weeks here, this dude's already got 3 touchdowns, excuse me. So he's trucking. I mean, he's really trucking. I think he's going to continue to do well because KC doesn't have a ton of offensive weapons. Their defense is above average, so they're not necessarily going to force them to put points on the board, which means that they can continue to rely on their run game to run out the clock in the third and fourth quarters if they are ahead, as they have been. So the other benefactors that Vanessa was the benefactor of was Michael Crabtree, who, again, this is another one who I'm just taking big bites of crow on, is he had a great game. He had 32 points on 6 receptions for 80 yards, 3 touchdowns in the Oakland win over the Jets, that's not impressive, but they won by 45-20. That's pretty impressive. So Crabtree is having a heck of a start to the year. In fact, he right now is the #1 wide receiver after 2 weeks, accumulating 46 points through 2 weeks. So he's doing very well. Apparently, he is the receiver to have, not Amari Cooper in Oakland. Now, that might switch. It's only been 2 weeks. This is only a small fraction of our season and of the greater NFL season total. But even still, that's a heck of a start. Kyle Rudolph had a very tight end week for her, 4 receptions, 45 yards, 8 points. And then Jay Ajayi is coming on strong again, 30 points this week, following a good season last year. So he certainly helped out. The losers were or kicker, not worth mentioning really, with 4 points. Tyrell Williams, the wide receiver from the Chargers, 9 points. And then famous Jameis Winston only had 16.6 points despite beating Chicago 29-7. He just really didn't do much. He wasn't that effective. He had 18 completions on 30 attempts, 204 yards, barely crossing the 200-yard mark, 1 touchdown, and 1 measly rush of 3 yards. So not a great start for famous Jameis. But she really didn't need his points. She could have benched him and still won this game. No offense, Noel. But it was just such a strong showing by Kareem Hunt, Crabtree, and Jay Ajayi that is going to be too far ahead. The last star on her team was the Broncos defense, who, as anybody watched, they shut down Dallas fairly well, and with including a 103-yard pick 6 from Aqib Talib. He had a great run back, and boy, they kicked their asses. Noel, you had a lot to like on your team this week. There's just a couple things that I found surprising. You know, kind of I was picking on the idea that perhaps Russell Wilson and Cam Newton are not elite quarterbacks anymore, perhaps not even fantasy relevant. Well, what about Carson Palmer? And if you look at what they've been doing so far on the ground, or in the air and on the ground, especially with David Johnson out, their offense just has not been clicking. Larry Fitzgerald is the 43rd best wide receiver through 2 weeks, has only scored 18 points total in 2 weeks. Certainly not what you'd expect from Larry Fitzgerald. So that certainly helped to detract from your points. Now, that was made up by a strong game by the Ravens. They had 4 interceptions, a fumble recovery, 3 sacks, and only allowed 10 points against the normally powerhouse Cleveland Browns offense, back in the 70s at least. And they just they just railed on them because Cleveland sucks. I can tell you from Crowell that they just suck. It's hard to watch them. It's really hard to watch them. I'm so sad for people that live in Cleveland for so many reasons. And the Browns are just a poop scoop ice cream on top with a cherry turd disgustingness to kick it all off. What the hell? Who is Giorgio Tavecchio? Who is that?
He's kicked around NFL, like he's been on preseason rosters for the past few seasons. I think the Lions had him at one point, and he is filling in for he might overtake Sebastian Janikowski when he comes back from injury. But he quoted, I believe he quoted Aristotle this week when he was asked after the game kind of about his experience. So he's entertaining. He doesn't have quite as big of a leg as Janikowski when Janikowski was in his prime, but as you've said before, Mike, having a team that scores a lot of points on offense, it's good to have a kicker who does that. So when I saw Oakland kicker who had a great week 1 going against the New York Jets, I was like, let's do it.
Yeah, 9 points is very respectable for a kicker. Considering the average is about 7, and that's not a huge differential, but on a absolute basis, that's 28% higher than you normally would get from your average kicker. So, and I had never seen the name Giorgio Tavecchio before. I just assumed that guy made my pizza the last time I ordered in. Anyways, the rest of your team had a fairly expected week, minus Fitzgerald, as we talked about, except for Delaney Walker. I think that you were absolutely right to pick him up for $10. That's a steal. He is an above-average tight end that always gets overlooked in our league. He got you 16 points, which is good for a tight end. That's not exactly elite territory, but definitely enough to keep him on your roster and start him every week type territory. The other one that kind of was disappointing for me was Doug Baldwin, and I think that goes back to my Russell Wilson comment. He's got 2 10-point weeks in a row. I just think that Seattle's struggling, and unfortunately, Doug Baldwin, until they start firing on all cylinders, which could be as soon as next week, they're just not hitting it. They're just not hitting it right. So Lamar Miller had an okay week, 17 points, certainly not bad, and then Roethlisberger had a muted 24-point week, certainly not what I'm accustomed to seeing from him, but I think he can do better. So sorry for your loss, Noel, this week. This puts Vanessa actually both of you tied for second place in the Pacific Conference, led by, and I didn't expect to see this, no offense, Kenfield, but the America Doomgivers are actually 2-0, leading the Pacific Conference and number 1 in the Mile High Champions League so far through 2 weeks. So congratulations, Kenfield. That's pretty awesome. So good for you, and good for Vanessa. Congratulations on your victory this week. Both of you are 1-1 heading into week 3. Let's go on to the next game.
One thing before we move on from this one. It actually could have been worse. While, I don't think Jameis Winston he did have a disappointing as far as statistical game goes, but this game, I don't think Chicago scored a touchdown until there was like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So really what Jameis Winston suffered from was not so much poor performance as going up against the Mike Glennon-led Chicago Bears, who couldn't do anything. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were just like, well, we're just going to run the ball. So it could have been worse there. And also, while this did affect me too, as far as Dalvin Cook not having a fantastic game, 14 points is pretty good for a rookie running back. It certainly affected Vanessa with Kyle Rudolph because we both got Case Keenumed as Sam Bradford is out for God knows how long now. Zimmer won't really say. So Case Keenum was playing against Pittsburgh, and Case Keenum is awful. He probably shouldn't be in the league, yet he's a backup, and he can't throw the ball long. He can't throw the ball short. So that being said, it could have been worse with if either the Bears had played any offense and defense at all, or if Sam Bradford was playing rather than Case Keenum. So good win for Vanessa here. I'm as I said in the preview, I'm happy to be the object of her vengeance against the fantasy gods. So great win, Vanessa.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, let's go on to the, if you don't mind, Nolski, do the Doomgivers versus Redneck's Delight.
I don't mind at all. This one, I think, I talked about it a bit in the preview where, it was going to be kind of come down to which quarterback had a better game because I thought both were going to play pissed off. And while Aaron Rodgers had a pretty good game with 28.6 points for Charlie, Tom Brady threw 3 touchdown passes in the first quarter alone, which is the first time he's ever done that in his NFL career. So that, again, that kind of took away from it. Could have been higher if the Saints could do anything offensively except for some garbage time points for Breeze and company. But from there, I mean, apart from 25 points from Jason Witten, which I shouldn't say apart because that makes it sound like it's standard. 25 points from a tight end is incredible in fantasy. I think this is where Kenfield would hope to get some more out of his other players, with his defense aside, because 6 points from Ezekiel Elliott, who had 9 rushes for a grand total of 8 yards. Had it not been for PPR, he would have had, maybe a point? So that's bad. Antonio Brown got shut down basically against Minnesota. And Darius Thomas, I think we're going to kind of see some up and down weeks from him. 13 points. Terrence West is questionable, I should say. And it's looking like he might give up kind of the main carries in Baltimore. So good win for Kenfield, but I guess some stuff to look out for. But then again, his bench is no slouch either. And then on to Charlie. As I said, Rodgers had a decent enough game, but the Packers were without both starting tackles, so Rodgers was kind of running for his life the entire time. Jordy Nelson went out early. Randall Cobb went out late. So it was kind of, most of his points came towards the end when it was, as I said, garbage time. LaShawn McCoy, I don't know if you saw the final score of that Carolina-Buffalo game, Mike, but it looked like a blowout baseball game with a score of 9-3. Woo! Yes, a kicking duel. Those are always exciting.
I hate those games. They're so boring.
Jared Cook had a tough game for Kenfield, got 6 points. Frank Gore had a very Frank Gore game with 15 points. Charlie. Why do we always do this? Charlie's team, not Kenfield's team. And Forte actually had a surprising 17 points because I would never start any of the Jets offensive players at this point because they've got themselves a McCown starting at quarterback, and I can't name one of their starting offensive linemen right now. And I can only name one of their receivers, so that's pretty good. And then from there, Charlie, as much as you and I love our Packers, you got to get rid of that defense, man. You just got to do it. I mean, they went against the number 1 offense and got 3 points, and it might get better, but it's not going to be great. So good win for Kenfield. Tough week for Charlie. And Kenfield, let's hope you can keep this up because that would be great to see you keep leading the league and making us all look like assholes.
Yeah. Keep that train rolling.
Rolling.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the Rams at the Spartans, a preview of the – God, there's that picture again. Oh, God, it's so hard to look at. This is a preview of the Engineered Bowl to happen later this year. And, boy, was it a good one. This is actually a really good game. It was nice and close. Less than 10 points separated these two. And both of them scored a fairly high amount of points here. Larson was able to pull off the victory, 142.8 to 134.8. But it was a good match nonetheless. There wasn't a lot to overly dislike about either of these teams this week, except for the single point Jimmy Graham put up. But that was because he got injured during the game. You can't blame him for that. It wasn't really so much a lack of performance. It's just a lack of just, if you don't, or you're not in the field, you can't really play. And for those of you curious, if you hear any squeaking in the background, that's just Noel's awesome dog Gatsby just crushing a toy. So that's what that is. You're not going insane. You don't need to worry about that. It's just funny to hear that noise. So anyways, let's go back to this. Rams, great week, Larson. Good for you. This is a big win for you because it gets you off. It gets you back in the game here from an 0-1 start to 1-1. And unfortunately for Brandon, puts him at 0-2, which is very peculiar to see Brandon not have any wins. It's actually kind of upsetting. So this is This is. Well, let me ask you this, Noel. What do you think is more difficult to predict, an 0-2 start for Brandon or Donald Trump becoming president?
0-2 start for Brandon.
Yeah, me too. I completely agree. Trump, I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. But it's weird seeing 0-2. Brendan having no wins for this. So Larson, let's just pick on a couple of these guys here. First of all, the guy that won in the week was Devonta Freeman, who's having a great start to the year again. Number 10 overall running back. This guy put up 84 yards on 19 rushes. Big time, though, with 2 touchdowns. That's where he got most of those 31 points. And then he had 2 receptions for 16 yards. So this guy, apparently, Atlanta's stellar offense from last year is continuing on this year. Zach Ertz, who I railed on in previous podcasts because I had him and he did absolutely jack shit, apparently has connected with Carson Wentz, is starting to, quite literally and figuratively, has connected with Carson Wentz to start putting some points on the boards. He had 5 receptions, 97 yards. He's doing quite well to start off the season. And then there were some expected games from Jiz Rogers, Michael Thomas. Not a bad game at 13 points, but still not what I'd expect from him. And then Golden Tate had only 6 points. So I guess it's difficult to predict. Matthew Stafford's kind of becoming Drew Brees in the sense that you don't know who he's going to throw to. He spreads the ball around a lot. So without Megatron there anymore, there's really no Detroit wide receiver that you can consistently rely on to get a lot of points. One guy's going to shine one week, and then another guy's going to shine another week. So between Michael Thomas and Golden Tate, there's definitely going to be weeks where Larson blows up his opponent and then gets a sad amount of points from those two. So good game overall, Larson. Brandon's side, again, besides Jimmy Graham, had a pretty good week. This Ty Montgomery for the Packers, they seem to be featuring him pretty heavily now. Normally, especially when Eddie Lacy came in a couple years ago, they were doing their platoon style of running back, which I'm not a big fan of, or any fantasy owner is a big fan of. But Ty Montgomery seems to be their guy. He got 35 yards on 10 rushes, but more importantly, 75 yards on 6 receptions and a touchdown. Oh, and he also had a rushing touchdown on top of that, too. That garnered him 32 points, definitely helping Brandon put up 134.8. Not much to dislike here. The only thing that I thought was kind of surprising was Matt Ryan had less than 20 points. After coming off a pretty solid start at 28.2 last week, 19.8 is a bit low for this guy. He only put up 252 yards on 1 touchdown. That's not great for and I don't know if I'd call Matt Ryan elite, but he's definitely one that goes under the radar that can typically put up a lot of points. So not a bad week by Brandon. Certainly not. 134.8 would have beaten a handful of other teams this week, including yours truly. In fact, he would have beat most other teams this week except for 4 of you, Nick, Ben, Vanessa, and then Josh. And obviously Larson. Oh, and Kenfield. I lied. So pretty much most of the league you wouldn't have beaten this year. Sorry, Brandon. I'm just going to keep spewing shit. So anyways, that was not your best week, but I think you'll, as we get into the preview, it might be a better week for you this week. Let's just say that. So let's go on to the pseudo Chick-fil-A Bowl. Noel, take it away.
So, unfortunately, Mike, obviously you didn't get your favorite fast food this week.
Nope.
And this was, looking at your lineups without looking at the score, I'd go, this should be, maybe around 120, 130 should decide this game. What an, oddly ugly game. I mean, as you said, both. I was surprised to see that Russell Wilson got over 20 fantasy points this week. I mean, I guess he did run 12 times for 34 yards, but 22 or 23 of 39 for 198 yards and a touchdown. That's something to write home about. But unfortunately for you, Mike, you had Cam Newton, who played up against the vaunted Buffalo Bills defense. No, that's not right.
No, another kicking match here.
That's right. More so, I think what did you in, Mike, here was not only did you have 2 players, just like, well, two non-kickers and defensive players who got single digits. Your starting running back who you had, it made absolute sense to start. You would, if you have Jordan Howard, you're starting him, to use like the stupid Matthew Berry line. It's just a thing. You're not going to bench him. For him to get you 1 point, this also illustrates the PPR thing. He had 1 less yard on the same amount of attempts as Ezekiel Elliott and got 1 point. So that shows you, I guess, how important PPR is. I think, though, there's some bright spots for you here, Mike. Jarvis Landry, you were very good at swapping him out during our podcast recording last week. And Kobe Fleener, who I don't have the stats trying to back this up, but I feel like he didn't really do shit in New Orleans last year. So he's had a touchdown in each game, I believe, so far this year. So I think that bodes well for going forward. Melvin Gordon, again, got fairly shut down running, but they're going to get in the ball. So 21 yards from him. Your kicker, as always, gets a lot of opportunity in Will Lutz. Your defense, I would have expected more against Tennessee, but then again, you suffered from Bortlesing. And now on to the victor is Courtney with kind of a somewhat pedestrian 106.6 points. She had some similar struggles, whereas you alluded to earlier, Mike, Amari Cooper, you never know when he's going to have a great week versus when he's going to have a 7-point week like this week. Ask Kerwin Williams got 7 points, which I think was probably to be expected. And I sent Mike a link to this earlier. Rob Gronkowski had a fantastic game, and Deadspin had just an even better headline saying, Gronk catches 69th score, injures groin. So it's just a total Gronk headline. But I think, stuff to build on here, I think for both teams, but mainly I would say, unfortunately for you, actually, no. I think, Mike, you saw this week that R. Kelly, even though he's listed as questionable, is the feature back in Washington going forward. And for Courtney, Derrick Henry, although, what is their coach's name? I forget. Mike Mularkey has said that Tennessee is going to stick with Murray as their starting running back. It looks like it's probably Derrick Henry's team going forward. So, Courtney, I think you've got stuff to build on. So do you, Mike. But as you said, I think there's some stuff to be worried about as far as the quarterback play goes, at least for the next few weeks.
Absolutely. I think Kobe Fleener was kind of a last-minute grab because I dropped O.J. Howard after the Hurricane Irma disallowed them to play that game. And I'd love to say, yeah, I had great fantasy insights and I knew this and knew that. No, I didn't. And what would be getting him these points are 2 garbage time touchdowns, both like at the very end of the game, which is garbage time, but like have no impact on the outcome of the game. It was just to get this guy a touchdown. So thanks, Kobe. That's pretty awesome of you to help me get some points. So let's go to the final 2 games here. 5 Second Chug versus AJ Green Lantern. Josh, hello. Happy wife, happy life. You're supposed to let your wife beat you at things, not absolutely destroy her, which you did. 143-95. Now, that's
I didn't see the stat line. Ouch.
Yeah. It was, boy, Molly just had a rough week. DeMarco Murray only got her 6 points, and that actually explains why Derrick Henry had such a good week. He pulled his hamstring in the game and only got 6 points. Greg Olsen is now on the injured reserve. How long did you say he might be? 6 to 8 weeks, something like that?
Yeah, he's designated to return, so he will be back. But for fantasy, it's like an eternity.
Yeah, good luck. Stash him on your IR spot, Molly. That's why we added them this year. But he only got her 2 points after getting hurt, which sucks because he's so good. I love Greg Olsen. Sammy Watkins got 5 points. I guess that's not too unexpected. He does play for the Los Angeles Rams. And then LeGarrette Blount, 1 point, not injured, just 1 point. He had 2 receptions for 30 yards. Okay. Really not that great. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong guy. I was looking at Sammy Watkins. He had 1 reception for 0 yards. My bad. So his 1 target he caught for no gain. Thanks for contributing, LeGarrette. So that just a rough week for Molly. Drew Brees, though, stood out. 31 points. Certainly he's off to not too bad a start. Top 10 quarterback, 31 points against now seeming to be mediocre New England defense. on 356 yards and 2 touchdowns. Certainly helped bolster her score, but not enough to make up for 4 single-digit games. You're not going to be able to come back from that. And then finally, her Cardinals defense had a pretty good game against Indy, as we were talking about, with Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback, which Lincoln apparently loves that name. I would just go up to him and I'd be like, Jacoby Brissett, and I'd start tickling him, and he would lose his shit. I don't know if he was laughing at the tickling or at just how bad Jacoby Brissett is. But we both got it. Probably the Colts. It's like, this guy keeps touching me while mentioning this guy's terrible, terrible football performance. So sorry, Molly, not a great week for you. At least there's next week. Josh, on the other hand, had a great week. He only had one player, Brandon Cooks, get 6 points, which is surprising because of Brady's stellar week in general with New England. But apparently, Brandon Cooks was just not really a part of that. He only had 2 rushes for 6 yards and 2 receptions for 37 yards. He only got 6 points. Now, where he shined was everyone else, including Matt Bryant, who got him 14 points. He kicked through two 50-yard plus field goals. That's pretty awesome. And then 4 extra points on top of that gave him 14 points. And the Panthers defense going against the stout and incredible Buffalo offense, who put up a whole 3 points. They really didn't do much. They only got 3 sacks, but what scored them that 20.5 points was the fact they only allowed 3 points from the terrible, terrible Buffalo team. The remainder of the team looked pretty good. Devontae Adams, 23 points. Jordan Reed, 10, even though Glass Jordan is now day-to-day questionable. A.J. Green got 11 points, which is low for A.J. Green. But as we were talking about earlier, they just haven't found pay dirt yet. And so I think he will bounce back from this. Certainly, and especially if the Red Rocket starts to connect with him, as I would expect anybody should, because he's just that talented. Now, the one who I think we all looked at last year and said, what the hell is going on? Because he's got so much raw talent. To me, he runs like Adrian Peterson, and he is a physical type player, is Todd Gurley. I think he's back. You look at these stats, 16 rushes, 88 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's pretty damn good. You're looking at 5.5 yards a carry on that. That's pretty awesome. Add on top of that, 3 receptions for 48 yards and another touchdown. So he's definitely adding up some points. The only thing which he's been known to do is he had 1 fumble, which, again, if you get 34 points, that's still pretty damn good. So you can knock off 2 and it's not going to end your day. So it was a good game by Josh overall. Congratulations on your win. That puts them 2-0, number 1 in the Atlantic Conference. Molly, unfortunately, is last place in the Atlantic Conference at 0-2. But again, only first 2 weeks. You don't have to worry about the winner's circle just yet, and you don't have to worry about anything really. Just keep on trucking. We're not even in the bye week tempest yet, so just keep on rocking. Let's look at the last game of the review, Noel, and head off to the preview.
All right. As I said, this was the game of the week, and going into this week, I'm fairly confident that I was pretty sure this was going to be a high-scoring game, and we weren't let down. Only, only 3 players total got single digits from both teams, and that, excuse me, on Nick's team included Tyreek Hill with a very surprising 9 points, and his kicker got 6 points. Who cares? And for Ben's team, it was T.Y. Hilton with with a very expected 8 points because Jacoby Brissett he's certainly better than Scott Tolzien. There's a lot of players who are not in the NFL who are better than Scott Tolzien. So that's not surprising. So just really great weeks by both teams. It's just that it's usually tough to take down a team that has the MVP each week. So co-MVP C.J. Anderson with 45 points in a game that, as a Broncos fan, I'm also hoping I don't think he'll get 45 points every week, but I'm hoping we'll see more of this than the kind of where the hell did he go kind of games, which he's prone to. Derek Carr, very, very good, 28.6. Not a huge game. Travis Kelce, again, killer tight end score, 26. If any of you haven't seen the highlight of him leaping into the end zone over 2 defenders, I highly suggest you check it out. Randall Cobb was on his way with 14 points, but got hurt late in the game and would have had more. Chris Hogan, who I dropped because I was going, I don't know if I'm buying this crap, because sometimes with New England, you're told to believe that so-and-so is Tom Brady's new favorite. And after week 1, he didn't look like that, and I got impatient. So good pickup, Nick, with because it does look like now he's his new favorite. 5 receptions for 78 yards and 1 touchdown. Tucker, who I think is a quality fantasy kicker, just kind of had a down week. Texans played against that just moribund, terrible Cincinnati offense, who, if they don't score a touchdown next week, will break a record. A bad record, but a record. From there, wow, I was just looking at his bench. I'm surprised that Bryant even had 18 points. It seems like a high for the past couple seasons for him. And then Stafford, is that right? Did he only have 122 yards passing last night?
That's what it says, yeah.
Wow.
19 points.
I stopped watching after like the first quarter because it sucked. But
it did suck.
So from there, you got good bench stats from him. On Ben's side, just solid all around from everywhere. Apart from, as I said, T.Y. Hilton, everybody, including his kicker and his defense, got a double-digit points. But as I said, it's tough to beat when you go against a team, an opponent that has a 45-point output from one of their players. So, lot to like on Ben's roster still, though, because Carlos Hyde looks like he's designed to go in Kyle Shanahan's system. So even though Carlos Hyde is receiving handoffs from the incomparable Brian Hoyer, who I will, Mike, I'll send you a link to put up on the blog to show how terrible he was last week. He still got 32 points, which was the most on Ben's team. And then Mike Evans, monster week 1 for him because it was the first week he played. 15 points from Jack Doyle, who got I want to say garbage time points, but that game was all garbage. So I guess it is garbage time points. Le'Veon Bell will do more. After a terrible week 1, he bounced back with 21 points. They're obviously feeding him the ball. Phillip Rivers is just kind of, he's quietly going to get Ben probably between 20 and 30 points every week, and we're all going to go, huh? So great win here for Nick. Good week for Ben, and I think you both have a lot to look forward to because I don't think, really, yes, Nick's not going to get 45 points out of C.J. Anderson, 26 points out of Travis Kelce every week, but he is going to get more points out of Tyreek Hill than 9 week to week. So great win, Nick, and good job, Ben, and both you guys, I think, should be making it at least to the playoffs this year if things hold up. But then again, Brandon's 0-2. That doesn't make any sense. So
we're in a topsy-turvy world. Who knows? Who knows? All right, let's go on to the previews, Noel. Let's start off with take it away, Vanessa versus Charlie.
Wow. I just opened this window. This is one of the closest predictions I think I've seen in a while. At 0.3 of a point, Charlie is favored with 129.7 to 129.4. But let's see if anything changes when we break it down. Jameis Winston against Minnesota's defense could be rough. Who knows what to think of Tampa Bay right now because they played the goddamn Bears in their opener. And the Bears defense is awful, as were Minnesota, who's also playing at home where they play faster, could be tough. But Aaron Rodgers is facing they're the 6th ranked defense. They've also played some not good offenses so far this season. However, Cincinnati's defense has given Aaron Rodgers fits in the past, so that right there could be a wash, if not in favor of Jameis Winston. And I don't buy this either. Mike, do you think that LaShawn McCoy going against Denver's defense should be favored over Kareem Hunt against the LA Chargers defense?
Nope. It's just because he's scored so many points this first couple weeks. His projection's high. But I don't agree with that.
Well, actually, he hasn't. It's more so this is name where LaShawn McCoy is got the check mark next to his name for the advantage because he's LaShawn McCoy as opposed to a rookie going to his third week. Crabtree is also not favored against Jordy Nelson, who is the 35th ranked wide receiver, versus Crabtree, who's number 1, as you said earlier, Mike. So that very, very well could flip. Tight end, I think, is very much, they have it right where they're saying Kyle Rudolph should outscore Jared Cook in favor of Vanessa. Jay Ajayi had a great opening week. He goes against a just abysmal New York Giants defense, an abysmal New York Giants organization. So I think, projecting 27.6 points might seem high, but it could also be low because, good Lord, they're a horrible team. Tyrell Williams, I don't know. I think, again, it's Matt Forte versus Tyrell Williams. We'll call it a toss-up. Broncos defense against Buffalo is not listed as the advantage versus the Packers against Cincinnati's offense. Again, it's a wash. I think Denver has better defense, but it depends on if Cincinnati figures anything out. Kicker-wise, I don't care. So I actually think that nothing against Charlie, obviously, but I like Vanessa more in this game, and I don't think it's going to be as close as listed because I think she's got some more firepower, as where I'd be surprised if Frank Gore, Matt Forte, and Jared Cook even hit their projections. So, yeah, that's my takeaway on this game. But Effentard, I think, might be broken. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Effentard's so hard to take seriously, especially when you consider how many variables actually go into an NFL football game. It just goes back to the idea that it's half skill, half luck. I mean, you can build the best team and be like the 18-1 or 19-1, whatever it was, Patriots, and go undefeated, except for the one game that it actually matters. So let's go on to your game, Noel, for week 3. And they have, speaking of Effentard, they have Kenfield as 9-point favorites on this one. And
he is undefeated.
He is undefeated. He is undefeated. But he also faces a lot harder defenses than you do this week. Especially Tom Brady, who has been the one who's been giving him most of his points so far this year, is going up against a pretty good, actually, Houston pass defense. So we'll see. So looking at the quarterbacks, Tom Brady at Houston versus Roethlisberger at Chicago, I'm going to make a bold prediction and say that Roethlisberger is going to outperform Tom Brady this week. And I just see that Roethlisberger, they need to do more. They need to do more in Pittsburgh to actually be competitive in the league. And I just don't – I mean, they're not in an overly competitive division, considering they have the Bengals and the Browns. I mean, that's a gift from God. But even still, they're not going to be like shoo-ins for the AFC Championship game at this rate. So I think that Roethlisberger is going to actually outperform Brady this week, especially Brady coming off such a big week. Houston's going to key into that and shut him down the way that KC did. Maybe not to the same degree, but I think that Tom Brady is certainly going to regress a bit more towards his average of somewhere in the mid to high 20s here. Ezekiel Elliott, which we will see, is supposed to not play this week. So we'll go ahead and we'll see what happens with that one. So let's just assume nobody is being compared to Lamar Miller. I'm going to pick Lamar Miller in this instance because Lamar Miller is better than nobody, especially since Lamar Miller is running against a very, very bad, very, very bad, very bad New England run defense, the 32nd overall. That's the worst you can possibly be against a run defense. He's projected 18.6. He's been averaging 17.5. I think that's spot on. Now, let's say Ezekiel Elliott plays. They just keep kicking this can down the road. He's going against a pretty good Arizona defense at number 7. And so I don't know. He's projected 28 points. He's only been averaging 19. I don't see that happening. I think that Lamar Miller is going to outscore Zeke. Now, say that Zeke actually does get benched. Who does he have to go in for him? Well, he has Jonathan Stewart, who he can start, which he already has in a flex spot. Or we can have the questionable Terrence West go in, who is day-to-day with a soft tissue injury. So who knows? If he needs to switch Jonathan Stewart into his RB slot, well, don't worry, folks. He has 3 other players on his bench, 2 of which he can't start in a flex position, which is the Seahawks defense and Marcus Mariota. So he's left with Los Angeles Chargers tight end Hunter Henry, who's been averaging as many points as a kicker. So no matter what happens in that running back slot, Noel, you're going to win. Let's go on to the wide receiver slot. We were kind of talking about, this isn't even fair because it's Antonio Brown against Doug Baldwin. We were already discussing Doug Baldwin's issues here, irrespective of defenses, which Baldwin has the advantage at the 25th ranked Titan defense versus the 15th ranked Chicago defense. It's Antonio Brown, and he's always been a stud player for them, even despite his shitty 11-point week last week. He is their weapon besides Le'Veon Bell. Those two, it's kind of amazing that Pittsburgh has both of them, but those two are their weapons there. And so it's a catch-22 because whenever your quarterback goes up against a wide receiver on an opposing team that's on their team, typically it hurts you as the quarterback owner because if you score a touchdown, there's a reduced amount of points for a quarterback versus full 6 points for the wide receiver, not to mention the PPR points on top of that. So I have to give this one to Antonio Brown ahead of Doug Baldwin, not just for that. Doug Baldwin, I think, is not as good as Antonio Brown, but that Ben Roethlisberger thing, I think, is going to be a bit of a handcuff for you. Jason Witten versus Delaney Walker. Jason Witten's actually the #1 ranked tight end through 2 weeks. It's just because with Zeke kind of just not being Zeke, they've had to go to other receivers, and Dez Bryant's been hasn't really been like Dez has been in previous years. So he's been going to his check down guy, which is Jason Witten, who is Mr. Reliable. Despite his age, he is still looking good as a football player. And for you ladies out there, he's handsome as hell. So fun to watch him in many different aspects. But nevertheless, I do think Delaney Walker is going to outshine him this week. He's going against a tougher defense in Seattle, but they're not in Seattle, and that makes a difference. Seattle at home is very hard to beat because that 12th man shit is real. And so I think that the Delaney Walker will have a much easier time in hot and humid Tennessee than he would in cold and rainy Seattle. It's not always like that. No one can tell you Seattle's quite beautiful, but this time of year it's probably a little more cold and rainy. Demaryius Thomas against Larry Fitzgerald. I completely agree with you, Noel. Demaryius Thomas is a up or down type guy. He's not Mr. Consistent. He's Mr. Consistently glass hands of last year. But I'm happy to see, as a Broncos fan, it's not that bad. However, Simeon, we've been relying on C.J. Anderson a little bit more than we have in past years, and Simeon's spreading the ball around to Benny Fowler, although he's injured now, Emmanuel Sanders, C.J. Anderson himself, and then Demaryius Thomas. So he definitely likes to spread the ball around, and we're just not a super pass-happy team. So DT's certainly I think both of these guys on a skill level, I would actually have to give it to DT, but Fitzgerald, I think there's just that legacy aspect, and he's just so damn good that he should have a good week this week, especially against the 22nd ranked Dallas defense. What we need to see, as we've already touched on, is what the hell, Cardinals, you need to juice all your players here. Not literally with steroids, but figuratively in the sense that they need to get their game going. Otherwise, they're going to be the laughingstock of the NFC West. I mean, they're just not doing well at all. So unfortunately for you, Noel, fortunately for Kenfield, I think this is Demaryius Thomas's pick. I will pick Demaryius Thomas in this slot over Fitzgerald. The final flex slot we've got, he has Jonathan Stewart. You have Dalvin Cook. This is Dalvin Cook's game for sure. He is looking solid. I mean, he is looking really good. I really like watching him play because, Courtney being such an avid Vikings fan, we end up watching the Vikings game every week, and he looks good. The only thing that could blow up in my face here is he's going against the #1 Tampa Bay run defense. Now, that's only through 1 week, even though it's been 2 weeks. Tampa Bay has had one game, as you'll recall, from Hurricane Irma, and it was against Chicago, who, with Jordan Howard, you'd expect to have a pretty good run game, but they shut him the hell down last week. So I think they have the opportunity to do that against Dalvin Cook, but I think he's talented enough to work their way around that. Now, Jonathan Stewart is good, but as we kind of talked about with Cam Newton and other Greg Olsen out especially, Carolina just doesn't have enough zing right now to make me feel like they can really perform well. So I think this is Dalvin Cook's pick for me. And then the Chiefs, Ravens against the Chargers, Jacksonville. God, the Chargers actually look better than I expected this year. Philip Rivers is playing angry just because he's an angry little twerp. So Marmalar is not too bad. And the Chiefs are playing pretty well. They're number 9 overall. But the Ravens are number 1 going against the Jacksonville shitty offense. And they got Blake Bortles, who is guaranteed to throw at least one interception, if not a pick 6. So the Ravens have to go there. And then both of your teams presently have kickers on their rosters. So with both of that, looking at all this, there's way too many variables and not enough certainty here, as with any other fantasy week and any other fantasy matchup, for me to say, yes, I feel comfortable. I honestly think this could go either way. If I had to pick one over another, I would pick you, Nolan. I'd say that even if you weren't podcasting with me tonight, I just think that Ken Field's been on a hot streak, but this is a week for Roethlisberger to come back. This is a week for Baldwin to show a little bit more fangs, and this is a week for Fitzgerald to come back. So you've been graced with a 1-1 record. It easily could have been 0-2 with these guys playing a little bit suppressed here. But I think that with the Ravens going against Jacksonville, and with these guys that I'm talking about bouncing back, I think you're going to win. I think this line's actually incorrect, and I think that the Titletown Warriors will come up with their second win of the season, handing Ken Field his first win of the season. Now, we're going to go on to my game next, and be kind. You know, my team looks good on paper, but in real life, they just blow so hard. You can make fun of Isaiah Crowell as much as you want. I watch him. He's like Balloon Boy 2.0. He is not Balloon Boy, the kid who's floating around in Fort Collins in an actual balloon. But Noel and I have a metaphor for, oh my God, his name is escaping me.
Trent Richardson.
Thank you, Trent Richardson, who, when there's an open window or a draft and you see a balloon kind of drifting towards it and it's bouncing around and it never quite gets out, or like a fly that's just batting up against a window and it never gets out. That's how Trent Richardson ran. He'd run up against his line looking for a gap, and that, to his credit, the line never gave him a gap, but he would just run and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and then get sacked for a loss. And he'd get the ball and run and bounce and bounce and bounce. So we called him Balloon Boy because of that. And I'm looking at Isaiah Crowell. He's like a junior Balloon Boy. He just doesn't have – I picked him because I thought he'd be good because he's pretty much the only weapon they have in Cleveland. But please feel free to rip him a new one if you want, Noel.
Well, unfortunately for Crowell, he's run up against some pretty stout run defenses to start the year. So I think that might change this week going up against the JV squad that is the Indianapolis Colts. However, looking at this game, the first thing that jumps out is I would imagine there might be some changes on both of your starting lineups before Sunday, or I guess even before Thursday, that is. Because for you, Mike, Jordan Howard is listed as questionable going against a decent Pittsburgh defense when it comes to stopping the run. Not great, not bad, but they're very humdrum, I guess you could say. And then Brandon has Jimmy Graham, who got hurt very early in last week's game, is listed as questionable, but he's going against the Tennessee defense, which, if he starts, could be good. And I would also imagine that Brandon is probably not starting the Bengals defense against the Packers this week. Not saying that he, obviously, no recommendations here at all, but as I said before, the Bengals have given the Packers fits in the past. So maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I'm just saying that might change. But going off of that, Mike, I think you might have your hands full this week because while I do like Cam Newton against that moribund New Orleans defense, I think he just doesn't really have the weapons to throw to. This might be more of a Christian McCaffrey game. He also just has a terrible offensive line. But Oops, sorry, the dog just hit the trash can. Matt Ryan going up against a Detroit defense that hasn't really been tested so far. So that's interesting to see. But I think Matt Ryan's probably the advantage there. Ty Montgomery right now over Jordan Howard, I think is the advantage. Emmanuel Sanders over Jarvis Landry. I don't know, because Jarvis Landry, he had a good week last week. He also attempted a pass. So you don't know. He gets return yards. He might get a touchdown pass. He runs the ball. So as far as fantasy goes, Jarvis Landry can get you some points. So I like that, especially, as I said, against the horrible New York Jets franchise. Tight end wise, I guess this depends on who they generally just assign to cover Kobe Fleener, but I think Kobe Fleener gets actually the advantage this week over Jimmy Graham. Marshawn Lynch, I like him against the Washington defense. Melvin Gordon, he's going to get fed, but KC, they shut down the run last week, but then again, you don't know if just Philadelphia can't run the ball. And as you said, Mike Crowell, God bless him. But I think I'm surprised. DeAndre Hopkins is the 9th ranked wide receiver after kind of being disappointing last year. So I think he's got the advantage there. I'm not sure if either of you are going to roll with those defenses. I would probably stick with the Jaguars, because while Baltimore's defense is good, their offense is sad. And kicker-wise, I don't know. I just have a hard time going with anyone who's not Will Lutz when it comes to fantasy kickers. So, Mike, I think this, while the line is close, I just have a hard time betting against Brandon. But then again, as I said, there's a lot of question marks as to, if you guys can make some changes, as well as, who plays and who doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that both of our rosters will look different by the time the game starts on Sunday. But at the same time, Brandon is due for a bounce back, and I don't think I can play enough on the waiver wires to save my soul. So is it too early to say congratulations, Brandon? Maybe not. So cool. Thank you. Let's go on to my wife's game versus
How do you keep getting this picture?
There it is again. Maybe by the end of the season I'll get used to it. This one has her as a favorite by 3.2 points. And let's see if that actually ends up being true. Let's just break these down here. I'm not entirely sure about that. If you look at granted, it's only 2 data points, but Larson's points are trending up. Her points are trending down. So this might not necessarily be her week. Now, what's keeping Larson, you look at the injuries, she's only got Gronk out. I mean, only, quote unquote. That's a pretty big person to have out, both literally and figuratively. But Larson's also got Luck, Doug Martin, and David Johnson out, at least for now. Doug Martin being suspended, Andrew Luck, who knows? But let's go through these teams. So Carson Palmer and Russell Wilson are 2 quarterbacks I was just picking on earlier in this podcast about, are they still fantasy relevant? Well, we'll see, because both of them are playing middle-of-the-road type defenses. Wilson's going up against Tennessee's 13th. Palmer's going up against Dallas' 17th. I don't know which one of these will outperform the other this week. Now, granted, Noel and I are just speculating here. There's much football knowledge, wisdom, we might, quote unquote, wisdom we might have. We're just taking educated guesses here. They have Wilson favored here, and I'm going to call this a toss-up. I can't. What do you think, Noel? Who do you think he's going to? Who would you pick in this instant? Was Wilson or Palmer?
I honestly have no. I want to give you an answer, but thinking about how Palmer has looked this year, I mean, Dallas has a poor pass rush, but Wilson's offensive line has looked terrible. I give the slight edge to Wilson, but I mean, it's razor thin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just hard to pick. But let's look at the next one, then the running backs. Leonard Fournette and Devonta Freeman. This is, again, these are 2 great running backs. These are keeping these guys in the competition here. They've been averaging 26 for Fournette and 23 points for Devonta Freeman. This is another very close one, because Leonard Fournette's going against the 6th ranked Baltimore defense, and we got Devonta Freeman going against the 7th-ranked Detroit defense. If I had to pick one here, I'm going to go with Fournette, just because they're playing at home, and I think teams tend to perform a little bit better when they're at home. So I'm thinking I'm going to go with Fournette here. Amari Cooper versus Golden Tate. These are two guys we were just talking about. Golden Tate might have a good week, might not. It all depends on what Matthew Stafford ate for breakfast that day. And Amari Cooper seems to be the number 2 wide receiver in Oakland right now, despite being the number 1 wide receiver in Oakland on the depth chart. So it's kind of funny. These teams are so evenly stacked this week. Cooper's going against Washington's 13th ranked and Tate against the 16th ranked. Now, of these two, I think that Amari Cooper has more upside. I'm going to go with him this week. The computer has Tate picked, but I think this is Cooper's game to lose. Now, she has Gronk in right now, despite him being questionable and day-to-day. I don't know if he's going to play. That's obviously what day-to-day means and questionable means. But at this point, I think that looking at this is somewhat of a moot point because I doubt it. Even if Gronk plays, I don't think he's going to be 100%. So regardless of who she finds on the waiver wire, if she doesn't play Gronk, I still think Zach Ertz is going to be a better pick here. He's going against the 26th ranked Giants defense. They suck so badly. And Zach Ertz, as we already talked about, has been doing really well this year. So I think at this and the tight end position is going to go to Zach Ertz. Christian McCaffrey versus Michael Thomas in the flex 1 spot. I like Christian McCaffrey. I really do. I know there's a lot of people who either love or hate him. There's a lot of haters out there. There's a lot of folks who love him. But looking at McCaffrey running against the 3rd worst New Orleans run defense versus Michael Thomas going against the number 1 Carolina pass defense, yeah, I think I'm going to pick Christian McCaffrey here. Not to mention, I just like him. I like the way he plays. He plays angry. He's elusive. He's fast. He still needs to get some NFL knowledge, but that's a forgivable sin because it's only the 2nd week of his NFL career in the regular season. So I think as he builds that up, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be one of those more highly coveted running backs as his years progress in the NFL. But for this week, I'm picking him over Thomas for flex 1. Flex 2, she's got Ask Sherman Williams against Jiz Rogers. And I think that until I see something from – gosh, this is tough. No, I'm going to take a step back here. I'm going to pick Ask Sherman Williams here. I think that I think they have to bounce back eventually. And Jiz is running against a pretty good Minnesota defense in Minnesota. So I think that Kerwin Williams is going to do a little bit better Monday night against Dallas's defense, number 27th overall against the run. So I think Arizona is going to step it up here. Then the Vikings against Tampa Bay versus the Raiders of Washington. Tampa Bay wasn't too bad last week, but again, that's one data set. Jameis Winston's kind of hard to tackle. He's not typically going to be super interception happy. He may drop the ball every now and again on a fumble, but I don't think you're going to get a ton of points off of Tampa Bay here. So I actually think that the Raiders against Washington will have a better day against Kirk Cousins, however you want to say it. And then McManus and Chris Boswell are going to kick the football when it's their time to shine. So looking at this, I'm going to toss my hat in for Courtney this week. I think that she's got a better opportunity to win. I think that overall, these are two great teams. And I do think both of these teams are going to make a solid run at the winner's circle. But for this week, I'm going to pick Courtney. Let's go on to the second to last one, the Kings of the North versus God AJ Green.
So right off the bat, I'm going to say that I think this is Ben's game to lose. I think Phillip Rivers, he's seen Casey enough. He has that, very expensive SUV for him and his backup quarterback to watch all sorts of film in. So I think he'll get more points than Dak Prescott. Le'Veon Bell, as I said, he's back against Chicago's defense. Mike Evans, while he's ranked 30th, he got 22 points last week versus AJ Green's average of 11.5 over 2 games. So I think Evans should have it there. Jordan Reed, as we talked about before, we don't know if he's going to play or not. So I think Jack Doyle, good start for Ben. T.Y. Hilton is the 60th ranked wide receiver in fantasy football right now. And he's matched up against Josh's Brandon Cooks, who's the 48th. However, I think Brandon Cooks is the one with the massive upside here because as we saw early on last year before he got hurt, Brandon Cooks can fill it up really quick because he's very, very, very fast. And I would imagine Belichick wants to get him started. Devontae Adams, he's been solid so far this season after kind of last year being up or down, even with a great year. And this is just kind of, I think Josh has a lot of upside where if AJ Green hits or if Brandon Cooks hits, he could very well beat Ben. But I think Ben just has too much consistency on his side this week. Combine that with the fact that he's got Carlos Hyde, who I think will continue to be a stud until he probably gets hurt, which I'm not hoping for, obviously, because no one wants to see anybody get hurt. And the Steelers defense going against the statuesque, as someone called him this week, Mike Glennon led Chicago Bears. So, Josh, congratulations. Congratulations, Molly. But I think Ben's going to come out of this, and I think both of you will be 2-1 after this week.
I agree. And yes, again, congratulations to both of you. They're off on their honeymoon right now, just sitting on a beach having a good time. So that'll be awesome for them. Let's go to the final game of the week. Speaking of which, the other now Josephson, Molly Josephson. This game has got to be difficult to analyze because she still has Greg Olsen, which I would expect. She's on her honeymoon, so she'll probably throw in another tight end here. Not too far away, but regardless, before we even get any further, I think this is Nick's game to lose, as you just kind of articulated about Ben's game to lose there, Noel. And here's why. J.J. Watts, he's got enough firepower on his roster here to kick some serious ass. You look at his top 8 players, all but 3 of them are top 5. All but 4 of them are, top 10. All but 4 of them are top 5, and 3 of them are top 3. He's got C.J. Anderson, the number 2, Tyreek Hill, number 3, Travis Kelce, number 2, Tariq Cohen, number 8, and Matthew Stafford, number 5. So he's definitely got a lot going for him this week. I think that this is Nick's game. He'll probably go to 2-1, and Molly, unfortunately, will go to 0-3. But let's look at these quarterback positions. They have Stafford ahead of Drew Brees this week, and I think that's simply because Drew Brees is going against Carolina's very difficult pass defense. They're number 3 overall versus Stafford's going against the number 22 overall Atlanta defense. So I agree. I think that not by much, but Stafford has the edge this week. C.J. Anderson against DeMarco Murray. DeMarco Murray is questionable, so very difficult to say. He is day-to-day. He may play this weekend. But they have C.J. Anderson ahead of Murray. I agree with that. C.J. Anderson's been playing fierce this year, fiercely. The only problem with that is he's going against a pretty good Buffalo run defense at number 4, whereas Murray's, if he plays, is going against number 21. And then Tyreek Hill against Julio Jones. I'm going to give it to Tyreek Hill. Even though Julio Jones is your kind of brand name superstar, Tyreek Hill has been phenomenal so far this year. He's been averaging 20.5 points, and it's going against a pretty weak Chargers pass defense at number 26. Not to mention he returns kicks. That always gets you extra points. Then he's got Travis Kelce going against an injured Greg Olsen. Think about that one. Assuming Molly gets another quarter or another tight end, I still am going to pick Travis Kelce. He's the number 2 tight end so far this year. He's just looking phenomenal, and he's going against a pretty tough Chargers defense against the tight end at number 12. But we'll just have to see who Molly puts in there. And then finally in the flex 1 spot, Des Bryant versus Sammy Watkins. I don't really like either of these guys, but I like Des Bryant more than I like Sammy Watkins, especially since he's playing a much easier Arizona versus San Francisco 49ers defense. Then we got Tariq Cohen, the kind of out-of-nowhere superstar rookie Chicago running back playing Pittsburgh versus Garrett Blount at the Giants. I like LeGarrette Blount, I really do, but Tariq Cohen, watching him play, he is feisty and explosive, and boy, is he fast. So I'm going to give this one to him. And we have the Texans going against New England. That's not going to be good for Nick. And then we have the Cardinals going against Dallas, which may or may not be good for Momo. Momo's got the Steven Gostkowski, which we were talking about before. When you got a high-powered offense that can put up points, you want to own their kickers. And then Justin Tucker, who is 18th overall, which is not even starter worthy. So I don't know if he's going to have a good week or not. He's really not that. He's a good kicker. He really is, and a very good opera singer. But I don't know if I pick him this week. I would take Gostkowski in most weeks over other people. So regardless, despite Gostkowski having the advantage over Justin Tucker, this is Nick's game. And I think the line, although it's low, he's only projected to get 120 points. Tamales 104. Granted, that's with Greg Olson out, but I think that he'll score. He'll win the game and put up north of 120 points. That would be my projection for this week. So that's the reviews here. Noel, is there anything else you wanted to add to the reviews?
Again, I don't want to really jump in and give too much advice, but I'm not big on Blunt so far this year. He was a touchdown machine last year when it came to the Patriots, but Philadelphia has yet to figure out kind of how to use him. So if I'm Molly, I'm taking him out of the game. I might bench Sammy Watkins. And there's some stuff to look at this week on the waiver wire. But Nick, you magnificent son of a bitch. I was trying to add Tariq Cohen last week, but I think you beat me to him on the waiver wire. So great pickup there. I think that projection of 12.6 is low because he is going to be the PPR back for Chicago, whether or not Jordan Howard is injured. So good thing there. But as you said, Mike, it's hard to judge this game because there's a lot of things that I would imagine if she wasn't wrapped up in some post-wedding honeymoon bliss, she might be paying more attention to. But yeah, there's some stuff to look at in her roster this week that might help her out.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Let's wrap up with the poll here and then sign off here. The poll this week is just about our good old-fashioned Broncos. I was just curious what you all think about the start to the season. I thought that, in all honesty, we were going to get a hell of a lot more trouble from Dallas than we did. So I'm asking, what do you think of the Broncos' start to the season? You either impressed, pretty good, what I was expecting, or meh, 2-0 is a long way from the Super Bowl. So go ahead and vote if you so desire, and we'll go from there. Don't forget to check the trading block often. It looks like there's some folks on there that, at least from Larson and my team, that are available to trade if you so need one. And we'll go from there. Don't forget, the trade deadline is week 6 of this year. We moved that up because of Bronco and Dave shenanigans from previous years. So we want to make sure that if you want to make a trade, it is before the halfway mark, because at that point anybody still has a legitimate shot at the winner's circle. So, all right, that's it for our podcast for this week. Noel, thank you again so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, apart from wondering if you're familiar with the Elton John tune "Rocket Man,"
I've heard of this. I've heard of it. Gosh, maybe 100 times I've listened to that song, so I'm quite familiar with it.
Okay, because that's you. You're the Rocket Man. But apart from that,
I'm the Rocket Man.
Go Broncos!
I don't listen to that soft shit. So. Anyways, if Noel and I are quoting The Rock. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Seriously, go watch it. Go watch it 10 times. And I'm sorry, Noel. What was that you had to say?
Go Broncos!